Career and Technical Education Month. With a brown bag presentation, I am Geraldine Jargo, State Director, Career and Technical Education, housed here with Minnesota State. And there'll be a recording of today's presentation. We'll put it on the Minnesota State, minstate.cte website. It also will be posted on the Center of Excellence website, so feel free to access it there. And in today's talk, please put your questions in the chat. We'll monitor the chat as we go along. We also will make sure that we point you to digital access of some resources for career and technical education teachers and faculty, career exploration, I can't talk this morning, career exploration opportunities, college pathways, and scholarships. So that's our housekeeping details. And I'm excited to see the participant list today. We've got 66 and counting participants. Our work in career and technical college can only be done by engaging partners. You'll hear from two of our excellent partners today about debunking the myths around career and technical careers in the trade and industry in our two-year college pathways. And we've got many partners on our list. I can see folks from our K-12 system, colleges and universities. We've got some community organizations, other state agencies, and business and industry partnerships. It's always dangerous for me to try to list them, so I'm not trying to leave out partners. All of you are welcome, and thank you for being here. And that brings us to our presenters today. I'm going to call them our storytellers of today. This presentation is really an encore presentation for something that began with CTE Works November of this year. And it's my pleasure to introduce Judy Barka, who's Assistant Director for our Minnesota State Northern Agriculture Center of Excellence, and Steve Homburg, who's the Director of Outreach for the Center of Excellence in Transportation. And I'm really not going to say any more about these two, except excellent partners, passionate about their work, and I'm going to turn it to them. They will tell you more about their story, and you'll see and read about the passion that they have for the work that they do. So Judy Barka, Steve Homburg, thank you for joining us, and I pass the baton to you.
Thanks, Geraldine.
Awesome.
We sure appreciate being here. I first of all, on behalf of Judy and I, we are really excited that so many people returned because about a half hour ago, we started our pre-presentation yoga. And I wouldn't say that was really successful and kind of scary at times. Judy, would you agree that it's exciting that so many people came back after the yoga session?
I really am too. You're going to see a picture later on in our presentation of what not disaster, but what an experience maybe the yoga was. So yeah, we're really glad to see all of you and with you today, and to be sharing some of the something that we're really passionate about, as Geraldine said, and we're excited to share some things, some tips and ideas, resources with you.
Thanks, Judy. You know, part of the yoga joke is really so that everybody in the room understands that Judy and I try to approach our work from a pretty candid standpoint. We want to be approachable people, and we want you to know that if we can have fun at any time, we do. So we would love to hear from you, any of you. Throughout the day today, there's going to be opportunity for you to put a bunch of things in the chat, questions, comments, concerns, thoughts, anything. And we are really lucky to have Yingfa and Cassidy kind of on our team today, making sure that we don't miss things in the chat. So also, they'll put things like web pages. Here's how you get a hold of our centers, which is ultimately how you get a hold of us. And should you ever hear the phrase transporticulture, it is our unsanctioned name of the Judy and Steve department. So Judy, as always, please interrupt along the way when I'm talking too much. Here's what we hope to do today. We really want you to leave today feeling like there's a few things that you understand a little better, make you think a little bit more about how you say and do things, and maybe some tools for you to use moving forward. So this isn't going to be a whole bunch of data. It's not going to be a whole bunch of earth-shattering things, but very clear, just a few action items you can do moving forward. We're going to talk about myths and stigmas surrounding some of these pathways. We're going to discuss a few basic strategies to help debunk some of those myths and stigmas. We're going to offer just a few examples of resources about direction you can go to help illustrate pathways, some scholarships, career exploration. By no means not a comprehensive list, but just a few things to get you rolling in the right direction. We'll share some links so that this is not all for naught. And of course, along the way, again, Yingfa and Cassidy have access to a PDF of this presentation with clickable links. So if you don't get them all written down, you don't get them all pasted, they'll be available to you. And then of course, we'll provide information for you to reach out to Judy and I in the future. If after this whole thing, you like us and you think you might want to engage in the future. Anything you want to add to that, Judy?
I would just share right away that if you've seen the chat, Yingfa has already put the PDF in the chat, which is really good. Thank you. I just want to add one thing. When Steve and I talk about the trades, we come from it in a very similar yet different perspective. Steve works in transportation. So when you think transportation, you probably think the first thought is automotive, but think broader than that when you think of the different various careers, and then think about how they will overlap with agriculture. I think the really obvious one there at the top, maybe the top of the list, is the whole CDL component is really an overlap piece between the two, but there are many, many areas that overlap between transportation and agriculture. And that's why that kind of is one of the things that led Steve and I to do some joint presentations together, talk about careers in both of our areas, and to share the wealth of what great opportunities that there are in both of our centers of excellence and both of our career pathway areas.
Yeah, and Judy's point is great, and I would even extend it a little further and say that just because we're transportation or agriculture or transporticulture, we're pretty sure that most of what we're talking about today would work in any of the sectors. So, so the first thing we want to talk about, and Judy's going to kind of flush this out, but we want you to participate, and we want to know just generally how you feel about some things. So if you've never used the chat before, you should find the chat button and start typing. If you would like to annotate your answers to the following question, please do so. So Judy, explain what we're going to ask them to do, what we're asking them to do here.
So when you think about, so I want to do one thing first. If you've never used, I mean, we're all experts of Zoom, but if you've never used the annotate feature, if you go to view options, wherever that's located on your screen, and you click on the annotate, the word annotate, you're going to get a box across, you're going to get a box that's got the option for mouse, text, draw, stamp, those kind of things. And you can use one of those. With the text, you can draw pictures if that works for you, or whatever works for you. Feel free to use that, or feel free to use the chat, either way. So there you go, Geraldine. So how would you describe your skills in the trades? There we go. You're highly skilled, you want to start your own, you're moderately skilled, or you're skilled challenged. We're kind of just trying to get an idea of where you see yourself fitting into those various areas.
I think this artwork is fantastic, Judy. What I'm so impressed by, this is the part of the presentation I love the most. I think there's a solid chance we won't be able to read these words in just a few minutes. Before we move on, I want you to know that the guy in the middle with the electrical issue, that was actual footage of me remodeling my house there. And in the upper left-hand corner, that would be Judy's husband. I hope he's here today watching this. He doesn't know that I have that picture. It's a pretty cool example of some fantastic work. So are you a 1, a 2, or a 3, right? Looks like we got some good answers.
Yeah, it appears that number 2 is the big winner of the day. Okay, now we're going to clear all that off for a second here, and we're going to go on to the next slide.
So using some of those same skills you just displayed, you can do a couple things. If you want to continue to annotate, circle anything that catches your mind, or you can put a little star there, something you see in this picture, or use the chat. We're looking for you to use some words or identify what it is that you are drawn to, or that you see, or that you're focusing on here. And Yingfa, Judy, Cassidy, I don't see the chat, so if you see it, please let us know what some people are saying. Yeah, fantastic. Where are the women? That's a I would also
Mhm.
mention while you're doing this exercise, it would be appropriate to identify which one of these men, especially the one on the furthest left, which one you think is the most handsome. That would be appropriate for this presentation.
That's
Judy,
a whole nother subject. That's a whole subject.
what are we
Not to
seeing in
go
the
there.
chat?
We're
Cool. I like
seeing
this.
all white men, all men. Yeah,
Dirty,
Duck
outside.
Dynasty. I like that one.
Yeah, cold.
All dirty.
Yeah.
Yep. Nice LED lights. Someone was commenting.
Yes.
Big machines and headlights. Got
Laborers,
the middle
levels.
picture. Okay.
Yeah, so
Yep.
I think what we're seeing here is just general things that come to mind. This is very authentic. What comes to your brain when you see trades like this? Now, what industries, I would say all those would be fair, by the way, that was there. What industries do you think these phrases describe? Again, if you're sick of the chat, that's okay. If you're standing by the water cooler or you're microwaving your soup, that's all right too. But if you happen to use the chat, let's now maybe talk about some of the trades that we think these bullet points might describe. What kinds of, or jobs, not just trades, jobs, low paying, things hard on your body, dangerous. Some things we saw from the last slide, right? Only for those types of kids. What kind of jobs are only for those types of kids? Or boring? Maybe like punishment, like you weren't very good at school, so you had to do this. That's a phrase I sometimes hear, dirty, messy, those kinds of things. Any jobs get listed in the chat that we should mention?
Food service, cashiers, PCAs, physical labor, warehouse, shipping, food service, assembly line, mechanical, a variety of construction, a variety of things in the chat. Very much so.
Yeah, good. We appreciate the participation. Judy and I actually get a higher level of pay the more we can add to the chat. We probably should have disclosed that in the beginning. Now, here are some examples we sometimes hear that are characterized with these sorts of phrases, right? Sometimes people talk about farming in that way. Sometimes
and that
people...
was listed in the chat.
Oh, good. Yeah.
Farming
or,
was...
Yeah. Sometimes people talk about being an electrician is dangerous work, maybe, or maybe hard on your body, maybe building construction. But
if you listed any of those, give yourselves a pat on the back.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, I think, and this is perhaps the root of this presentation right here. We automatically think of those industries, and maybe that's because you showed up today and the title said something about trades. But now I want you to think about these. Sorry, I'm clicking back for a second. All of these descriptors. And now I want you to see if you could add any of those descriptors to the following. Do we ever talk about being a teacher and low pay? Dangerous, maybe? Do we ever talk about being a dental hygienist as, boy, that's really dirty, messy work?
Hard on the bodies.
Do we ever talk about all those workplace injuries, that people who do repetitive things, like being someone on your computer all day, those kinds of stuff? Or do we only talk about manufacturing in that way sometimes, right? I think that everybody in the room gets the picture. There's likely more similarities between both ends of the school than there are differences, but we don't always talk about it that way. This is what we believe. We believe that what you say and what you see is what you get. So if we continue to perpetuate that trades and careers are less than, careers in the trades are less than, that they are dirty work, that they are what you do if you can't do something else, then we are going to continue to have these issues. And the fact of the matter is that just work in general can be that way, right, Judy? Work in general can be hard on your back. If you had your choice, Judy, every day, would it be to sit at your computer or would it be to work on your farm?
That's not even a choice for me. I much prefer to work on the farm, but I have found, and I would expect that many of the rest of you have found too, that during COVID, working on a computer on a daily basis is much harder than I thought it would be for as much as I do it now. And so it's a different kind of exhaustion at the end of the day than it is being on the farm and feeding animals and doing that kind of things. But it's definitely physically exhausting to do both jobs.
Absolutely. So as you see from this sweet graphic here that I'm not responsible for, if you start getting rhetoric turning around, then you start getting myths and stigmas turning around, and suddenly you have this workforce and skill shortage in the world. So here's what we think you could do about it. Now, if we could come up with the perfect solution, we would be so well off that we would just be attending this presentation today and we wouldn't be having to give it, right? But hopefully this conversation leaves you with some things you feel like you can do. We think that if you show and tell, you share examples of modern day skilled trades, you talk about opportunities, and you avoid rhetoric that leans people, students, young people, adults, decision makers, influencers. If you avoid rhetoric that will lead them down a path of this would not be what you would want to do, then we think you're going to help debunk these myths and stigmas. So let's practice this a little bit. Judy, can you run us through what we're hoping to have people do right here?
Yep, exactly. And so again, we're asking you to use the annotation or use the chat. These are agriculture related pictures. What industries, what career, let's use instead of industries, let's think about the focus of career pathways or career areas or careers do you see in these pictures? And you can start writing them in the chat or you can annotate on the side, however works for you. But what industries, what careers see in these pictures?
Absolutely. As things are coming in the chat, again, you can use the annotate to circle things, or you can put it in the chat. Think about maybe a pathway of study. Maybe there is no study. Maybe there's a company you see in here. Maybe there's, like Judy said, an industry. I love seeing the chat button blink, and of course I can't read it while I'm sharing my screen. So anything in the chat we want to start listing off?
There's some great answers in the chat. Animal production, manufacturing, the GPS software design, the IT, civil engineering, veterinarian, animal breeder, quality control, food production, all of those kinds of things have been mentioned in the chat. Yep, computer science, lots and lots of horticulture, machine trades, engineering, transportation, logistics. Thank you. There's a lot of different answers are coming up. Engine repair, and such a variety. I mean, you can even see from just on the screen where people have annotated the variety, the variety, and I'll say that again, the variety of opportunities that there are just from these two pictures.
Absolutely. And I think, again, if you go to the chat, and if you came a little late, maybe we can add it in the chat again because you may not be able to see it. There's a PDF to this particular presentation that's obviously there for you to access. This is an example of something we do when we talk to students, and Judy is the master at this. When we're out in schools, she will look right at everybody and says, and we'll say, is this really just farming? This isn't just farming, is it? And they start talking about, oh, that's right. If I go into agriculture, it's not just farming, for example, it's all these other things. These are high-tech things. These are things that take skill. And often what we find in schools, and we know this, schools have a very distinct set of measurements they have to follow. It's how our system is, and we can argue all day about it and wish it maybe was different, and maybe someday it will. But for now, what we can do, what we can change at this moment is to help gain awareness and change the way that we talk about things. Yes, this is farming. Yes, it may be hard on your back. Yes, it may be a little dirty. It's also high tech. It's high efficiency. It's a greater good. When we talk about what Gen Z cares about in the world, they want to be part of solutions. They want to be part of a greater good. I'm guessing that right here, obviously, there are, right? Okay, so let's do this.
So Steve, go back to that slide for just a minute. Yeah. One of the things that we talk about in agriculture is about the percentage of jobs that are not on the farm. And when we look at that percentage, it's above 75% of the jobs in agriculture are not directly on the farm. And if you look at this list of career opportunities, look at how many of them could be on the farm, but are not necessarily directly on the farm. You're going to find that most of them are probably not on the farm. Veterinarian would probably be one that could be or could not be on the farm, but a variety of those of the jobs. And that's one of the misconceptions that we see in agriculture, food, and natural resources. The first identifier when students are asked, what do you think about a career in agriculture? Usually the first response that I get is, I don't want to be a farmer. And this is to the point of, it's not just farming.
I think, and
Okay,
to that point is understanding that when we use rhetoric that puts people in their defined area and it's very closed-minded, we create division. And I think we all live in a world where we know that if we create too much division that's unrealistic and just really isn't the total story, it doesn't get us we don't become our best selves. We don't serve anybody that well. Notice this list. This could be applied to any of the trades. All of these areas could be applied to any of the trades. When we talk about autonomous technology, for example, in machine control, or that sort of connected automated vehicle things, that responsive technology to help you park your car or to make sure you don't leave your lane, that stuff really crosses over into everything, including everyday life. It's important to see we are more together than we are separate. And that's the important part of this. The rhetoric we use must talk about how we're all together. Here are examples of words. If you're taking notes, and I'm sure that at least 75 to 80 of the 104 in the room are taking serious notes, or you could utilize your screen, your print screen button at this point. If you use these words, we believe this will help. This is important work. You can afford to be trained in this. It's hands-on. I think everyone, especially after the last 10 to 11 months, understands the value, the human nature of hands-on opportunities, things like that. Anything you want to add to this? I think it's pretty straightforward, right, folks? Use these words.
Yeah, I would agree. I would very much agree.
So now,
and for many young people, those words are what attract them to some of the careers that we're talking about.
Yes, and I'll just add, we also sometimes do a little talk about Gen Z. I recently did a little writing about it. What you need to know is that often we will approach students with all the bad things that could happen, and then therefore why they want to do things. You want to go into the trades because it's cheaper education, and the worst thing ever would be college debt. Well, the truth is, they have a lot of anxiety. This generation has a lot of anxiety about a lot of things, and it isn't that college debt isn't bad. It's that we want to talk to them about what could be. We want to open their minds to ways they can be successful, find their best selves, really get along in the world without the division of so many things. So use these words. They want to make a difference. They want to have good lives.
And Steve, there was a couple words that were added in the chat. One was valued. Yes. And the other one was essential. And I think they're really good words too. Thank you for adding those, because we need to put those on our list as well.
Now, this particular slide, again, if you want to add to the chat, or if you just want to relax and sit back and actually get a chance to actually eat some lunch and things like that, that's okay. But this would be something, again, that you could do with students, that you could do with parents, and you could simply say, what do you see here, right? The same exercise we've been doing, but now you can use the words that we just gave you, and you can talk about some of those things that you see here and help people see that, for example, on the far right, isn't just a skilled trade of being a painter. It might also be visual art instruction. And this is one of my favorite stories ever. And I have sort of an industry secret here. And if we get to the end and we feel like, oh, we're good friends, maybe I'll share it with you. But I spent a lot of time in K-12 teaching a subject that is non-traditional for where I'm at right now in my life. And one of the most fantastic things I noticed the second I started working in with the transportation center, and I was at a collision and repair training facility, one of our college partners, and I looked out and I said, everything they're doing right now to fix that fender is the same thing I saw in the high school pottery classroom when I would walk down at the end of the day to see what was going on. There are things happening on both ends of the school that will help everybody. Right. Judy and I just recently had a meeting with an industry partner, kind of in the central western part of Minnesota. And we were talking about what kind of technicians do you need? And Judy, can you explain what it is they said they needed? Remember, they talked about the new technology and they were looking for people who were good at what?
Okay, now I'm embarrassed, Steve, because I forgot.
We were talking about,
Thanks for putting me on the spot.
We were talking to an industry partner that has machine control that's GPS driven. And we said, do you need welders? Do you need people to assemble things? And he said, what we really need right now is people who are in IT, who love doing computer problem solving and programming, that are willing to work in agriculture, but they don't think agriculture is a place for them, right? Do you remember that conversation now, yes. Judy?
No, now I'm really embarrassed. Really embarrassed.
It's those kinds of conversations are really hard to have when we don't know, right? So you get the idea. Now, this right here on the left hand.
Two things, Steve, I want to interrupt again. I want you to take a look at this slide from the perspective of how transportation and agriculture overlap, because I think this is one of those slides that shows that. And then I would like to, in the chat, Geraldine Jargo had mentioned, think about teaching in these career fields and how incredible if your career pathway moved to teaching these in high skill, high demand opportunities. And I don't think that we are both, Steve and I are not probably good enough at putting that out there. We should be doing more of that. So Geraldine, thank you very much for the reminder. And I think that's one of those things that we need to engage students that way as well. Thinking about teaching, if they have a skill that they're really good at, how can they think about teaching that skill as well? So please go on, Steve.
So what we have here is, and you don't know this, but we've been working with Ying Fa for a couple of days now, preparing for this. And all the pictures on the left-hand side are actual pictures from the house remodel she's doing right now. So that's probably a little oversharing there, but we hope that you'll enjoy that little insight into our personal lives. Here's some things we can do.
I thought the middle picture was the yoga picture.
It could be from the yoga. I hope everyone enjoys my sense of humor. It's you guys are doing a great job of just dealing with it. Here's what we want to do. We want to talk about opportunity. So we think that these pathways become more credible if people see that there's an end, right? If there's a place to go. So what we know for sure is that there's lots of healthy job market in the trades right now. There's lots of job opportunity. What we also know now, for everybody listening, we work for Minnesota State, and so it's very easy for us to talk about how many, literally hundreds of training programs there are in the trades and all across the state. And so, of course, there's other places you can get training, but let's be honest, this is the most affordable option, and this is where we work, and we advocate for this stuff. We like it. So again, there's something for everybody everywhere. Think of the barriers that students often face, whether it has to do with living at home or needing to have a job separate from going to school or rural various things. All over the state, you can get trained. You want to let people know that. Help them overcome the barriers. Lots of resources, speaking of barriers, like scholarships, internships. But most importantly, Gen Z, these are meaningful and these are meaningful and fulfilling careers. This isn't what you do when you can't do something better. This is the story of my father, 35 years as a truck driver. I can remember his hands frozen. Days like today, he worked, he hauled feed. Those animals needed to eat, and it didn't matter how cold it was. Dad, I want to become a teacher. I want to work inside every day for the rest of my life, is essentially what I said. And it was not in a trades-related field. My dad did nothing to discourage me. He didn't understand anything I was doing, and never once did he question. He wanted me to do something meaningful and fulfilling. He didn't tell me one way or the other. He supported me, and I'll appreciate that forever.
Steve, I'm going to interrupt.
Yep.
There was a question in the chat to define the word the trades. Why do we use the word the trades?
I don't know. I don't know. You know, what's interesting is so often that the trades incorporate everything. Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah. And it's defined as well, it's not defined, but it's an old term. It's been around for a long time. I read somewhere, and don't quote me on this, but I read somewhere not too long ago, it kind of goes back even into medieval times when we talked about blacksmiths and people that build shoes and those kind of things. They were tradesmen, and they traded. It started out as they traded their skill for somebody else's skill, and that's kind of how it got started. And it's just one of those things that's carried forward. I don't know if that's the answer that you were looking for, but it's very much a worthy discussion, worthy of having further discussion. And maybe we need to find a new word for trades instead of trades. What could we use instead? If you have suggestions for that, put them in the chat. What could we use instead of the trades or trades?
I think too, it sparked something for me. I did recently Google search trades, and I came up with things like tradesmen, skilled trades, and it was very, very distinctly a term for people who were able to accomplish high-level skills. It's interesting how that sort of has shifted sometimes, and I think it's inadvertent. I think people just don't realize that what we say all the time is what we get. It's human compatible learning. So mostly I was looking for an opportunity. Go ahead, Judy. Yep.
So Tim Barrett put in the chat that a trade is a skilled job, typically one requiring primarily manual skills and special training. A profession is a calling required specialized knowledge and often long, intensive academic preparation with continued learning during the practice of the profession. Today, there's a lot of overlap between those definitions.
Absolutely.
In how they're looked at. Thank you. Thank you very much for Tim for putting that in there.
Yeah, absolutely. So we were looking, Judy and I really like this picture that says download happiness. So we were really trying to find a place for it in our presentation. And we hope that this will actually help you. Now, again, not comprehensive, but here are examples of what we often will do to help this problem out. The first thing we'll talk about is we'll try to address some of the barriers that students feel, which is, can I afford college or not? Right? Or is it worth it? And this particular example on the left-hand side of this career earnings kind of graphic really illustrates, it helps us talk in the conversation about over the span of your lifetime, if you're going to make $500,000, $600,000, $700,000, $800,000 more, you really can't not afford to spend about $6,000 a year now. And that figure is the average annual tuition in a Minnesota State two-year college. That doesn't include housing and all those things, but it's a place to start the conversation. Again, we talk about the options. We don't talk about necessarily all the reasons why you wouldn't, but all the reasons why you would. But we also be very honest about it. Lots of trades opportunities in terms of scholarships. Many of these things go unawarded. So later on in the presentation, if you download the PDF, you're going to have actual link to this Trades Hub website if you don't already. Lots of Minnesota-based scholarships here. Really important to share with students when you're trying to get rid of the stigma and to talk about the credibility. If there's all these people wanting to help them get trained, it's likely a pretty valid career in our opinion. We also think that it goes a long way with parents. Now, I want to caution some of us who spend a lot of time talking to students about annual salaries. And what I mean by that is it's important information, but it's oddly relevant. So what I mean by that is the average student isn't paying all of the bills and doesn't always understand in terms of thousands of dollars a year, what the difference is between $40,000 and $60,000, for example. But what is really important is to talk about, is there job availability and what that might mean in dollars per hour? And you can pretty easily estimate that. But we also think to show things like the graphic on the left, to show, look, this is worth getting trained. You're going to find a job. Have you ever heard people talk recently, the last year or two, about all the people with 4-year degrees who can't find work? So students are used to hearing that now. That's a common thing. But that doesn't mean they just assume that everything's available to them. Lots of jobs are available in 2-year pathways either. So anything you can do to share and help. On the right-hand side is one of my favorite examples of how our professional organizations can give you some resources and the boost you need to help advocate. This happens to be transportation related, carcareers.org. You'll notice, if you can kind of see the fine print of the web address, this is actually a link on their webpage specifically for counselors and teachers. It comes with actual letters you would send to parents. It comes with multilingual options so that students who aren't using English as their first language are able to access some of this same advocacy type materials. Judy, would you talk a little bit about the importance of getting out and seeing industries?
Yeah, one of the things that just to go back for just a second, if you go to the AgCentric website, that one of the things that you're going to find on our website, well, you're going to find a couple different things. It's a resource for searching out ag careers that are available out there and agriculture related programs. It's also a resource for looking at job market kinds of things. What careers are there in food products and processing, for example, and what kind of education do you need? What are the openings? Where can you go to school? Those kind of things. Those are all, we have those located on our website. And Steve has those, or the Transportation Center has those on their website as well.
Yeah.
And then to just switch gears a little bit, the importance of, to answer Steve's question about what's the importance of getting out and seeing things in person. When we talked earlier about what are some words that you hear or that you have experienced about jobs in the trades, the dirty, hard work, low pay, those kind of things. Those are misconceptions that are out there, and that we as centers of excellence, but we as educators need to try and overcome those kinds of things as well. And there is nothing that sells an idea or can help change a mind better than an actual experience. Going into a car dealership, going into a mechanic shop, going into a food processing plant or a manufacturing plant or something, and actually seeing how clean it is, what the working conditions are like, hopefully being able to talk to some of the people that work there and experience kind of some of the activities that they do in a typical day. Now we know that with COVID, we haven't been able to do a lot of those industry tours. We're finding that one of the ways we're doing it, and this is the way that the Centers of Excellence, or the Transportation Center, has put together this very well done list of virtual tours, places you can go and students can experience what it's like to be in there. We in the Ag Centers of Excellence are in the process of not so much virtual tours, but career exploration videos. We have them on our YouTube channel where you can take a look at, for example, what does it mean to be a veterinarian? And we have a veterinarian that works for Medtronics, and we have one that works in a large dairy. And so you can see kind of two sides of those kind of things. Again, a short, simple way for students to experience something that may lead them to a change of mind about what is a career and this might be something that I'm interested in and something I want to explore further.
You know, I would just add these 2 wrinkles to that. Number one, remember, our people that work in schools, I as a former teacher would be a classic example of this. often the people who work in schools were quote unquote good at school. So you were good enough at all those kind of core normal non-trade subjects perhaps, and you were passionate about sharing with students, you were passionate about making a difference in their lives, and so then you did everything you could to become that teacher. And now you're that teacher and you do everything you can to be good at teaching whatever your subject is. And while all those things are happening, the world of the trades is passing you by, and it's not your fault. It's not your fault that you don't know what you don't know. Just like for students, it's not their fault that they don't know what they don't know. So what you can do then is help educate yourself. So for example, it's not just enough to say, hey students, here's some examples, but have in the back of your mind as an educator, as an influencer, a career counselor, an admissions rep, I want to know more about what's going on in the industry. And if you can't eventually rebuild a transmission on your own, or you can't eventually operate the geopositioning system on a combine out in the field, that's okay. But you can speak intelligently about what we see when we go there. Use those words we talked about before, and also put students in front of people who are like them. So I'm a 42-year-old balding male, and I don't know that that always helps my cause when I'm trying to explain to a spry, intelligent 18-year-old what options they might want to look at. So again, getting them in these situations helps them see themselves there and illustrates better than just our words.
Yep.
Again, barriers and opportunities.
Before you go on, one of the things I would say is the centers of excellence have a lot of great resources on our websites, and but one of the things that we have that we don't necessarily list on our website is connections with industry. And so if you are working somewhere and you want to try and connect with industry and you maybe don't know where to start, as centers of excellence, we can be a starting point for you. And especially in the world of, we're so much better in agriculture than anyone else, you know that, how that goes. But anyway, the diversity that we see in agriculture sometimes be a stumbling block because I don't know where to start. Kind of, if I want to do a tour of something or I want to connect with industry, it sometimes can be a stumbling block because agriculture can be so diverse. Please don't hesitate to reach out to either Steve or myself. We would be happy to speak with you about that and help to make connections across different areas with you as well.
Absolutely. And I would add, now I can't see the chat, I can see it blinking, but you know, I'm thinking Yingfa and Cassidy already probably have put contact information for us, web pages, all those things in there before. They might do it again. I promise you that if we don't know something, we'll try to send you towards someone who does, including in the other centers. So if you say, look, I want to talk to somebody in healthcare, then we can get you connected with our health force partners, for example. Sometimes students, you know, obviously have barriers. Minnesota has a fantastic scholarship program that awards millions of dollars, and I'm not exaggerating, millions of dollars per year to students specifically going into some of these trades areas. Yes, the Scan Me link actually works if you've got your phone out and you're multitasking during this, which by the way, I'm not judging at all. Maybe I am too, you just never know. I would encourage you, if you don't know anything about workforce development scholarships, to get on it and figure it out. And Judy and I happen to be very passionate about that. So if you just want to talk to a human about that more, you can reach out to us, email us, we'll get back to you. On the right-hand side, you can't read hardly any of the words. And that's our point with this particular graphic. There are opportunities everywhere. This particular graphic showcases all of the different schools in the state that have locations in the Minnesota state system alone that have some of these agriculture and transportation programs. So again, show people all of the possibilities rather than talking to our young students about all that can go wrong. These are our top 12 transporticulture web resources. Again, not comprehensive, but if you were to download this PDF and you were to say, okay, tomorrow I have a student coming in who wants to know more about scholarships, maybe there's something on here that could help. Over here, If you are having an issue where you're having a hard time getting an influencer to understand, maybe you are that influencer that's having a difficult time to understanding the value and importance of the trades or this interconnected nature of everything. We would invite you to explore some of these things and some of the resources that are on there. Again, not comprehensive. The truth is we thought top 12 was a nice number, so we went with that. And we were able to keep the words big. There's lots and lots more out there. A search will get you there.
I think so. Before you go on, I think one of the things really quickly, if anybody has another great resource that we should consider for our top 12 list, we would love to see it in the chat. We will be, we're going to be saving everything from the chat so Steve and I can go back and review it and take a look at those resources. We are of the belief when Steve and I go out and talk to influencers, talk to a variety of different places, the more resources that we can share, the better that we feel. We just love to share resources, and we really feel that that's part of our job, is to share those resources, not just with young people or students or people looking at different career changes, but as use the term, we both have used the term back and forth, is the influencers that work directly with those students and can be a huge influence. So if you have something that you think we should take a look at, please put it into the chat. We would appreciate that very much. Okay, Steve.
Very cool. So I once applied for a job where I used this following picture, and I was told very clearly, if you ever do any more presentations, you need to include the picture. So here it is. And I want you to just think a little bit about what school or career pathways do you think each of these guys chose? Now, we went through this exercise before, and we talked about all the things we see, but we didn't necessarily cover all the perhaps very unlikelies in this particular picture. And the goal here is to help you understand that although we all look the same, although the beard on the far right is the most impressive and the one on the far left of the most handsome man is reasonably impressive, we are all very different, yet we all were contributing to the same cause. And so when we talk about these types of people work in these areas, we are creating unnecessary bias, unnecessary barriers. We are contributing to the stigmas. On the right-hand side is the guy who owns the company. He owns the equipment. He's highly trained in his areas. He is also the guy that had several children who had a fantastic music teacher, and he thought that was great. And he didn't consider himself a musician, but he loved music, and he thought, this is a good guy. I like this guy. And so when that guy was looking for work after his music career, he hired him. And he hired the guy on the far left. And that guy has a 4-year degree in liberal arts, almost 20 graduate level credits in music, but did very well in that industry. Not the best machine operator, not the best truck driver, not the best mechanic, but a person who came to the industry with passion and worked very hard and was successful, maybe still is successful today. Rumor has it works with one of the centers of excellence. The next guy over is a great example of a student who stumbled along the way, but then found a way to finish. And he got that certificate, that commercial driver's license. That's what CDL means. He can run some heavy equipment. The next guy over has a 2-year degree in an unrelated field. But because of those skills, because he was trainable, was able to be a really important person in the company. The goal here is to help everybody see that it's not about all the things you aren't, it's about the things you can be. And it's about everything is interconnected. There's a way for us all to work together. If we continue with the rhetoric of this is only for those kinds of people, if we continue to only talk about the negative parts of any profession, you get a sore back or you get a headache working on the computer, or you get a sore back or you get a headache working on a bulldozer. It's not that we don't want to be transparent or truthful, but what we want to do is be honest about all the parts, and that's that there's something for everybody. Judy and I are really honored to be here today. We aren't always amazing. but we try pretty darn hard to be as amazing as we can, and we want to learn and we want to be part of the partnerships. And we're just really thankful for the opportunity to work with students, to work with people across the state. We're thankful for so many people being here today. If there's anything we can do to help or anything you want us to know, these are ways that you can contact us. Also add things to the chat. If you really loved it, you can annotate little heart shapes all over this final screen if you like, but we won't be offended if you don't. Judy, anything you want to add here at the end?
I want to make a comment on what there was one comment in the one resource in the chat that referenced deed, and I want, and as far as looking for data when it comes to this, and I want to speak from a yeah, we will take some questions too, Yingfa.
Yeah.
As we speak to the idea of looking at jobs, careers in agriculture, I have a personal frustration because deed has a very narrow focus in that it looks at farming, logging, and fishing. And when we look at, in the Centers of Agriculture, when we look at careers in agriculture, we look at the 8 career pathways that are defined in the career wheel. And so we look at things, natural resources, power structure and technical, and animal plant systems, and all the 8 categories. And those, it's harder to get a true picture using deed data than it is other resources. We have been, and we really like the way Real-Time Talent has pulled together information about jobs and opportunities in agriculture. And I encourage you to reach out. And if you're going to look at get the widest breadth of picture, to really look at more than just one source. Deed offers one perspective, Real-Time Talent offers another perspective. And so I would encourage you to keep that in mind as you go forward. If anyone has other questions, I mean, please don't hesitate to put the questions in the chat, or, you know, at this point, if we could certainly open up, you could unmute and ask your question if you wanted to do that as well.